Hi, I'm Alex. Today we're gonna be, I say we, I mean, unless you guys want to share old things you've written. It should be a dead giveaway for what we're gonna be kind of doing today. I'm gonna be doing today. I keep saying we. That's a problem. I mean I. I've seen a couple people around AuthorTube looking at their old writing and kind of, well, frankly, most of them are like, oh my god, it's dreadful. And not whether it is or not is beside the point. But I personally like to look at my old writing more as like kind of what's changed. So for this video, I thought I'd kind of look at my old writing and basically like what I liked, what I didn't, or what's changed or hasn't changed. Now, caveat to all that, all of the things I've written before were fanfic. And while I still love fanfiction, that's neither here nor there. I'm not personally comfortable putting up fanfic for others to see in the video, just because while the story may be my work, the characters aren't, and copyright issues and all of that. So I have actually read the two, one's a poem and one's a story. So I have read those ahead of time just so that I don't have to have it on camera. Now, I will tell you what each one is. That's just for my comfort level and precautions. The first one I read was a poem called, well, you know what? Frankly, I'm not gonna, because these are actually technically still available online, I left them there as basically archived, but I'm not going to make it easy to find. But it was a poem. It was a fanfic poem for the Vampire Chronicles. How I managed to escape the wrath of that particular author, I don't know, and I don't want to test the waters of whether she's still doing that stuff. The site it is on claims that it was written 12 years ago. Now, I did the math, and that is not accurate. It is older than that. I believe their site may have stopped counting after a certain point of... And the other one I read is a fanfic for X-Men. The site claims it's about 600 words. It's about accurate, but I am suspicious of their word count. It was for my two favorite characters at the time. And I say at the time as if my favorite characters aren't the same, but it was a really short, kind of like an introspection. I know, I'm being vague. There are some things I noticed while I was reading these. The first very specifically came from the story, and that was, it didn't take a lot to develop the character. While I was using characters that are familiar to everyone, I was very vague in the, like, I didn't say the names of any of the characters until the very end. So I had to use essentially personality and development as a way of getting the reader to figure out who the character was. And it didn't take a lot to do that. In 600 words, it didn't take very many words to kind of get from a character who was questioning things to... He was still questioning by the end, but it was like he had some kind of answer. And by the end, you distinctly, at least in my opinion, maybe it's because I wrote it, but there was a distinct, this is who this character is. In both the poem and the story, I started them with questions. Starting with a question immediately, even for me rereading it, pulled me into it. By starting with a question, it was like, okay, I already kind of am in the mind of the person speaking because this is what they are asking the world around them. Which then could also be used as kind of a initial introduction to their personality, and in a lot of respects that's exactly what it did. A lot of this is coming from the story just because there was a lot more to work with, but in the story, especially toward the end, I had compared two of the characters. One who people stayed away from of their own accord, while as one of them kind of acted in a way to push people out or away. By comparing them, I was able to build both characters at the same time, and you can build each character up. And I don't know why I stopped doing that, because that's actually a really interesting, like reading it, knowing it was my own work, that was a really interesting way of doing it. And I could definitely incorporate that into more of my writing. But for some reason, I did it once and then just never did it again. Back to the question thing. If you ask a question in it, those questions need an answer by the end. Now, I'll be the first to admit that the initial question I started with was not the question I answered. I had asked another question later on that was what I ended up answering. And I'll be the first to admit that depending on the question you answer or you ask, there isn't going to be an answer that's like the most satisfactory answer, but it is still an answer. Because some questions just don't have answers that are as clean cut, especially if you're writing something about, like, if you're doing a mystery or something with battles and stuff. Sometimes, depending on the villain of the story, the answer you're getting is just not gonna be an answer you like. But the point is, you still have to answer the question. Reading this story again reminded me of something, well, actually even reading the poem as well, but reminded me of something that I think switching to long form stories kind of made me forget. And that's character study writing, by its very nature, just feels more intimate because you're getting into the head of a single person. You're looking very closely at them, and generally speaking, you're looking through their eyes at a situation. That's what a character study generally does, at least in my experience, and it just pulls you in to it in a lot of ways. If you're trying to understand a character or something, maybe it would be helpful, at least maybe for me, to write a character study piece, because then it kind of forces me to look at everything from their perspective. Final bit of thing I noticed, or learned, or whatever, is that having a really good understanding of your character helps you write the story a lot. Now, I know some people like to leave a lot of playroom in their characters when they're making them. I think for me, and it's the reason I started with fanfic and everything, is I had a very deep understanding, or as deep as any of a fan could have, of the characters I was writing. That's why I only wrote certain characters in the first place. And by having that understanding of them, I was able to write something that was more emotional. I was able to write something that was more meaningful. I was just able to write more because I already had an understanding of how they grew up, what their motivations for things were. I understood a lot of the little quirks that they had from watching them, reading. Like, I had that understanding. So for me, having that just made writing them that much easier. And more than likely is also the reason why now when I write a character, I fill out ridiculously long questionnaires about them. Do I need to know what their socioeconomic status as a toddler was? No, but I do. Those are the things I've kind of noticed going back and reading my old work. Let me know below if you've gone back and read your work before, and if there's anything if there's anything you noticed from that, if there's anything you learned from it, maybe something you used to do that you stopped doing that you want to start incorporating again. That is all for now. I will see you in my next video. Bye! Can we wait until the wind stops? Probably not.